For those of you who have been listening to GynoCurious over the last year and a half, you probably noticed that my approach to health and healing is, eclectic, to say the least. I'm an MD, trained in allopathic medicine, and years of practice have shown me both the incredible strengths of this approach and its very real limitations. The guests I've invited to the show reflect that perspective. There is no single or only one way to heal. Real healing means looking at the whole person, body, psyche, spirit, and personality, because each plays a role in how we recover, stay well, and live fully. Is it an easy journey for us? No, not so much for most of us. And is our current medical system built to support this kind of whole person care? Nope, it is not. So the question becomes, how do we, as individuals, find strategies that actually work for us today, tomorrow, and in the long run? How do we make choices in the face of serious medical diagnoses, but also with everyday concerns that quietly shape our health? Welcome to GynoCurious. I am your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we're here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please send comments to comments@radiofreerhinecliffe.com. Tell us about your concerns, your thoughts, your questions. Please, I love to hear from you. And if you want to learn more about my clinical practice, which is both in person and virtual, please go to dramynovatt.com and you'll see all kinds of information about how I might assist you in helping you in all of your efforts to be well. So today, I am so happy to be speaking with Lydia Slaby. Lydia is an advocate, speaker, and writer focused on empowering people, communities, and organizations faced with daunting change. In her words, despite 3 fancy private school degrees, a successful husband, a high-paying job as an attorney, cancer turned her world upside down. Her book, Wait, It Gets Worse, published in 2018, is a remarkable story of love, integration, acceptance, and renewal. And I have to tell you, Lydia, I have been reading your book now over this last, I think maybe only 2 days, and I have been just immersed in it. So thank you for bringing it to me and to the world. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you. And thank you for the compliment. I'm very proud of her.
Yeah, as you should, as you should. So I guess, would you share with the audience, those who are listening, the events that kind of catapulted or was the impetus in writing this amazing book?
Sure. So it feels like an ancient story now, but it's not. In 2012, I was working as a corporate litigator in Chicago, and I started having weird breathing symptoms. I started just losing my breath, and I was in pretty good shape. And so losing my breath felt like a problem. But of course, because life was stressful and there was all sorts of things going on, I ignored it for about 6 months. And then basically because a friend of mine and then someone else really strongly encouraged me to go see my doctor, I finally went to see my doctor. And from the moment that I saw my doctor on the morning of June 28th, I basically didn't leave the hospital complex for 2 weeks. I went from her office to a cardiologist. I went from the cardiologist to the emergency room. I went from the emergency room to inpatient care. And that was the moment that we all learned that I had a tumor the size of a grapefruit sitting on my heart. And it was causing all sorts of issues with breathing, heart issues. It was just all of it. And having that particular moment happened, I was 33 years old. I'd been married for 2 years to the man who is still my husband, I'm delighted to report. It was one of the, it's like, you don't think that's going to happen when you're 33, right? Like when you're 33, you're thinking about your career, you're thinking about potential children, you're thinking about marriage. If you haven't already gotten married, you're not thinking about cancer. Cancer is something that old people get. And not in my family, but that's a different story. And so what prompted me to get into the writing was, I'm a writer. Most lawyers are frustrated writers in some capacity or another. And I'm a writer. It's how I express myself. And so I just started processing what I was going through, and it was an incredible amount of stuff all happening at once. And I was entirely overwhelmed by the entire thing. And the only way that I could start processing it was by writing about it. So I started a blog. A friend of ours from college happened to be the CEO of Livestrong at the time. He saw my blog. One thing led to another, and suddenly I was writing sort of op-ed style pieces about this experience that I was going through. And it all felt very temporary. It was like, oh, I'll do this while I'm sick, and then I'll go back to my life. And then when I was lucky enough to not be sick anymore, and I tried to go back to my life, I realized that whatever I thought my life was no longer there for me to land in. And that's what prompted this book, was the idea that, we're told, especially when we're young, if we get sick or if there's sort of a life-altering moment, it's like, okay, get through this moment and then just go back. Like, go back to the world that you were living in. And it's like, I'll try, but I don't think the world that I'm living in exists anymore. And realizing that kind of like nobody knew how to really talk to me about that, or nobody, at least that I was talking to at the time, really knew how to talk to me about that, was overwhelming. I was highly educated. I felt like this was something that somebody should have told me at some point. It's like, I'm surrounded by smart people. Why has none of these smart people told me this? And so I had to go on my own path of education and exploration in order to figure out how to answer this question of, how do I create a life that works for me now that I'm not in this world that I thought I was in?
Yeah. What struck me about the book, well, I must tell you, as I flipped through, I underlined so many things because you're a great writer.
Thank you.
And I didn't know that about attorneys, that they're frustrated writers. That's interesting.
Most of them, if you ask, this is a blanket generalization.
Of course.
But most of the attorneys that I've had funny conversations with about this, they're like, oh, I really wanted to be a novelist, or like, oh, I really want to be a screenwriter, or like, oh, I really want to be.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So writing a memoir, telling a very, very personal story, and this is a very personal story.
Yes.
Was that something that you were kind of comfortable with, or was that a leap of faith for you as well? Kind of putting out all of that information is a brave act, and not every writer will tell you about their lives. They'll write fiction for a reason.
Right. It was interesting. I was totally fine with it until 2 weeks before the book came out.
What happened?
Well, it was funny. Michael and I had just moved here, and I'll never forget this. I was driving. We live in the village of Rhinebeck, and my sister lives in the town out by the fork in the road. And I was driving from our house to my sister's house, and I was passing the mobile station on the right. And suddenly I just started hyperventilating. I was like, oh my God, I have put into a book all of the most intimate details of my life for 2 years of my life. Like my husband's and my sex life, like, all the things I was feeling, just all of it. And I had to pull over, and I pulled over somewhere around Brookmead, and I called my publisher, and I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And she was like, okay, let's have a conversation about this. And so I just had to have like my moment of breathing into a paper bag.
Yeah.
And then I was fine with it. And she was like, most of this is already out in the world. Like, you were pretty raw when you were writing your blog posts. I was like, yeah, but there's a difference between a blog post and a book, and like the book's in the bookstore, and blog posts in this like buried website that nobody looks at anymore.
Light and fight. Yeah.
But no, I've always been a pretty open person. And actually anybody who knows me well will just sort of be like, oh yeah, Lydia will tell you how it is. And like, she's really unfiltered about the whole thing. And so the book is not an abnormal like extension of that side of my personality. But yeah, suddenly realizing that it was in paper that strangers could read.
Right.
Like,
in one fell swoop.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my gosh.
For those of you listening, I'm holding up her book. Yeah. So as I said, I underlined a lot of your words, and I'm just going to read some of them throughout our conversation, because I think they're so important to share. Lydia, you wrote, a control freak's reaction is to change life, not the plan. You also wrote, cancer fundamentally changes the patient with or without that person's permission. So as someone like you who has self-identified as a control freak, at least at one time, and knowing how capitalism and the demands of our work lives impact the way we are living, particularly in the States, whether we're workhorses or we have to work 3 jobs to pay the bills, how do you see your own experience as a particularly driven person impacting your story and the changes that happened?
Oof. Well, I was living the life that I was living because of this aspect of my personality. I'm blessed with brains. I take no credit for them, but I have them. I have the privilege of a remarkable education, but I have this like type A drive that my parents still don't know really where it came from. I'm not saying that I did cancer to myself, but I did my life to myself. I had to achieve. Like, I did really well in a top private high school. I did really well at an Ivy League college. I went to a top 10 law school and a top 10 business school all at the same time. I chose to do that degree in 3 years instead of the normal 5. I chose to then go to, a big law firm where 100-hour weeks are the norm, right? And so at some point, something was going to break. And in some cases, folks who have my kind of story, their marriage breaks. In some cases, their career breaks. In some cases, their health breaks. And in my case, my health broke. My health broke at a moment where my marriage was also breaking. So, that made it even more fun. But that kind of life is not something that we're built to do. Like, we're human beings. We're not human doings. And you mentioned capitalism, and at some point in the last 200 years, we decided that the purpose of being a human is to be productive.
Yeah.
That the purpose of being human is to be an input into work. And then as a result, widgets come out and then money is produced from the widgets. And we've really done a horrible mind trick on ourselves, thinking that this is what it means to be human. We can talk at length about what I think it means to be human, but that took 10 years of sort of being in this conversation. But, capitalism in the way that we have chosen to do capitalism is destroying our health.
Yes.
It's destroying our capacity to love. It's destroying our capacity to connect. It's destroying sort of who we are as a bunch of social creatures who just like hanging out with each other. And I was deep into that machine when I got sick. And, I had kind of glimpses of it when I was in treatment and I was away from kind of my normal life enough that I could see it with some semblance of perspective. But when you're in the middle of being a cog in a really big machine that has made you think that that machine is super important, it's really hard to see your own cogness, and it's really hard to see the machine. But,
yeah,
that's the world we're in.
It is. And moreover, when one is a high achieving human who has gotten a great deal of accolades for those achievements.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but my ego is very wrapped up in what I do. Not only because I love what I do, but it's because I get a lot of pat on the backs for it.
And you get a lot of likes.
Yeah, you get a lot of likes. People follow you for that. And so, more recently, I kind of stepped away from the work I was doing in corporate medicine.
Yep.
And it was really striking how much I had to kind of process, okay, who am I? What am I? Is anything else in my life as remarkable, etc.? And so I wonder, how much for you was ego a part of it as well?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the dopamine hits or the whatever hits of at a girl.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of Gold Stars.
Yep.
And it was funny because even when I left Sidley, my old law firm, which I have no complaints about, I had to tell them that I was leaving not because I had to take care of my health, because that seemed like a shady reason to leave a good career, which is bananas. I told them that I was leaving in order to write this book. And so this book in some respects also gave me the excuse that I needed in order to get out of that world.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh, cool, you're leaving to write a book. That's great. And, of course I didn't tell anyone, but I left my job in early January and I spent all of January sitting on the couch watching TV, not writing a word.
Right.
And to be fair, Chicago in January sucks, but I also had no energy. I couldn't do anything. Right. And just telling my firm that I was leaving because A, I couldn't take any more FMLA, and B, I just needed to lie on the couch for a month and sleep. That wasn't a good enough reason for me to leave that job.
Yeah.
Which is just looking back on it, it's just so bananas.
I know. Well, guess what? Self-care is seen as a weakness.
Right.
And it continues to be seen as a weakness. The only reason perhaps it's shifting is because it's a COVID, but also it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So people are capitalizing on it. So where it's a little easier to say, oh, I'm going to take care of myself and go to a spa, or I'm going to take care of myself and do yoga, or that kind of that preface, it makes you seem a little less
selfish.
Yes, selfish. But also there's something very I'm going to be really generalizing here, but nurturing has always been in the world of female. Mm-hmm. Productivity has been in the male arena. Mm-hmm. And both in medicine, law, many industries, certainly traditionally there were more men than there were women. And this grind that you've described was very much part of the hazing and the fraternity, at least in medicine. That's true.
Yeah.
Also, stepping out from that position that you're describing and saying, I'm going to take care of myself is a little too feminine of you. Mm-hmm. I've had the same experiences with my own health and saying, just taking a day off was seen as a sign of weakness, failure. Yeah. Why can't you take better care of yourself and do all of these things, 80-hour weeks? Right. So it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. As a physician, when I read books about healthcare or people's journeys with medicine, I'm always very sensitive around the descriptives of doctors. And certainly in my experience clinically, oh my gosh, so many women come into the office and lament their experiences with the medical industry and clinicians and treatments. It's hard. And people are very, very frustrated, particularly with today's system. Yep. So you talk about the doctors and clinicians that you met during those many months of healing, but you particularly pointed out those who treated you like a person, quote, with fears and feelings, end quote. How would you counsel listeners about finding their people, their healing team in the face of such systemic obstacles?
Oh, man. Well, to begin with, and I just want to preface that I think anybody who chooses to go into the practice of medicine is in their own way a saint. It's one of those worlds where everybody thinks it's an exact science, and it's not. It's both a science and an art. And, as part of that process, literally at times even holding people's lives in their hands, people who are willing to do that despite of current malpractice, blah, 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 blah. I really do think it's remarkable, anyone who chooses to go into the practice of medicine. My brother-in-law is a urologist, and so I sort of see some of this behind the scenes stuff. What's getting in the way of the actual practice of medicine is the fact that sometimes he only, and the doctors that I saw only had 10 minutes to see me as a complete person, to be able to write up notes, to be thoughtful and come up with a creative solution to something. And that's an impossible ask. You cannot do that. And I don't care how brilliant anybody is, it is impossible to provide that kind of care in 10 minutes. And the fact that private equity firms have gotten into the game of medicine is absolute horseshit. And whatever, I can go off on that tangent for a while.
You and me both.
But to find your person, I was really lucky in that my oncologist was kind of gifted to me. A friend of ours in Chicago was deep into sort of various medical nonprofit-y kind of things. And she had recommended a GP to us. And so we were like, okay, great. Like, we'll take her advice. And so we went to this GP and she was lovely. And then the best part about this GP was that she was the one who found my oncologist for me. And she didn't even ask my advice. She'd been tracking my chart all afternoon. And so she just called up her friend and said, you need to go find this patient. She's in the hospital somewhere. Go find her. And the reason why I clicked with that particular doctor was, well, there were multiple reasons. But one, she showed up. And oftentimes it's even hard to get doctors to show up. So she showed up. Two, I'll never forget this because I met her when I was coming out of a anesthesia haze. The whole thing was bananas. But Michael was sitting on the windowsill of this room that I was in somewhere in the hospital. And she sort of looked at me and she kind of like grabbed my toe. She was like, I got you, girl. And then she looked at Michael and she was like, how are you, husband? And like, I had no capacity for like filter or anything at that point. And I just burst into tears because this was happening to me, but it was also happening to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that she recognized that and knew that I was incapable of answering a question because I was literally coming off of, I don't know what medication, and took the time to sort of see him as a person was remarkable to me. And then, and I know this sounds ridiculous and it puts so much pressure on doctors, she gave me her cell phone number. She and I would text each other. And I know at this point it feels like the only way you can get that level of care is through concierge medicine, which is a whole problem in and of itself. But it's a solution to this other problem. And so which is the worst problem? I don't know.
Yeah.
But she was available. And she recognized that I was one of these type A lunatics. And she was constantly helping me defend myself against my own brain. She was like, don't Google things. I'm not going to give you the list of side effects because you're just going to spin yourself up about the list of possible side effects and you might not get any of them. Right. And so like she got me in a way that no other doctor had ever really gotten me before. And I was very lucky that that happened with my oncologist because I didn't have a lot of time to find a new one. But if you have the time to find a doctor, you're not in an emergency situation and you have the luxury of some options, it really is just a personal connection. And whether or not that person is capable of treating you in 10 minutes is almost sort of a sidebar issue because everybody only has 10 minutes to treat you. And so whether or not those 10 minutes work for you, I think is the most important aspect of that particular relationship. And then, you know, any good doctor, as you probably know, has to stay late and do their charts and send notes in the whatever it is. But like, I mostly just had to make sure that I was capable of getting along with her in a way that worked for me and my personality and my brain.
Yeah. When we're ill, we not only feel, we are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've alluded to being a control freak. There's only so much we have control over in this kind of setting. And it's extremely little. But what we do have control over if we are not in a state of emergency is being able to say, that person looked me in the eye.
Right.
That person touched me in the appropriate manner that made me feel seen. That person listened to me, even if it were just for a few minutes. I know that I can go back and continue my story.
Right.
Or, you know, people can also make a decision that, hey, I don't care if that person's listening to me. If I need my appendix out and I just want a great surgeon and that's what I want, you get to choose that way too.
Totally.
GynoCurious often talks about how you kind of feel your way through healing. And that part of that feeling, if you will, is the interaction that you have with your clinician. And hopefully you can create a team of people with whom you can call on and access when you need them, both in emergency and non-emergency environments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you alluded to this in the intro that you have a sister.
I do.
And that she had some illness of her own. And I kept thinking as I was reading your book, you mentioned your sister and then you had this illness. And I couldn't help but think of your parents and your husband and the people around you who love you. And, you know, I don't know about you, but family dynamics in my life, in my arena, you know, can be pretty challenging, you know, without illness.
Right.
But then when something very disruptive, something like a major illness occurs, I guess, is there any guidance or lessons that you learned about family and other intimate relationships and like how to interface with our illness, healing, and those who we love and who love us? I guess in a way, I'm talking about love and community and how it works and how it can be challenging too.
Yes, it can be challenging. So just to give a little bit more color to that, I was diagnosed in 2012. My sister had been diagnosed with a different version, actually, of the same kind of cancer in 2006. And she'd been kind of in and out of treatment for 6 years. And when I was diagnosed in June of 2012, my sister was actually in Germany getting a different kind of treatment that wasn't available in the United States because she'd run out of treatments available in the United States. And so she was literally in treatment in Germany. And here I was walking into Northwestern Memorial. So that was a lot
Yeah.
for the family to kind of handle all at once. It's just her and me and my parents. And so I called her first. I was like, I don't know how to talk to mom and dad about this.
Yeah.
And my parents are a little older. My mother was 38 when she had my sister, and she was 36 when she had my sister, and she was 38 when she had me, which is older for people of my generation. Feels super normal now, but not then.
Right.
And so they were both in their late 60s, maybe. You know, my sister was hilarious. She was like, you just have to rip the Band-Aid off. You just have to call them and tell them. I was like, oh, great. And so I did, and it was fine. And everybody showed up in a good way. They immediately jumped on a plane and came to Chicago because I was the one in more distress than Krina was, because we were all used to Krina being in treatment at that point. Sounds terrible, but like, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, my mom she tried to be like a doer, right? Like a mom, like, how can I be helpful? Like, what meals can I cook? Like, how can I, you know, Michael, what do you need? And da 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 da. And my poor dad, he just sat there totally overwhelmed. My father passed in 2020. My mother is still with us, but it's diminished capacity. In some respects, that particular moment, my sister and I talk about this a lot, feels like the beginning of the downhill slide for both of my parents. My father fairly rapidly began to lose his memory. And then he spent the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years of his life in really an acute stage of dementia. And we didn't realize, because my mother was doing so much of the taking care of my father, that she was also slipping into sort of that kind of dementia, which, you know, like 70s, 80s, that's a normal thing to happen. But in my family, with the genetics that I have, that didn't happen to anyone until their 90s. And so it was real.
Yeah.
It was real. But back in 2012, I found this post on the LA Times before they put up a firewall, or paywall, not a firewall. And I don't even know if it's there anymore at all. But it was this article that someone had written about how to handle illness and sort of the communication thereof. And it was this idea that the person who is sick sits at the middle of a bullseye, in the middle of a target. And the person who is sick is allowed to dump out to each ring past that person. And the only thing that's allowed to come in towards that person is love. And every sort of outer ring has a like literally a specific group of people. So I was the bullseye. So I was only allowed to get love, and I was allowed to bitch at anyone. My husband was in the immediate circle around me. So he could give me love, and he could bitch at anyone except for me. And then, you know, and then you sort of go out from there.
Right.
Parents are really bad about this. And I've noticed this sort of, not just my parents, but it feels like parents are just in general really bad about kind of recognizing this. And we were really blunt with people. Like, I shared the article with them. I was like, listen, you're in circle 4, you know, like, here we go, right? Like, you have to treat Michael with kid gloves, and you have to treat me with kid gloves, and you can be awful to anyone else, you know?
We're seeing the attorney and her come out.
Yeah, exactly. We were like really organized about it. But, you know, I can't tell my parents that they're not allowed to complain to me about my own illness. I eventually figured out a way to do that. My dad was great, mostly because he was just, I think, stunned by the whole thing.
Right.
And he's an introvert. And so he just really kept to himself. My mother was terrible about it. And to be perfectly honest, my husband's father was absolutely atrocious about it. You know, we had to figure it out. It was just one of those things where it's like, all right, you just roll with it, right? And you take the love where you get it. And when you take the bitching, you just let it go. It took me a little while to learn how to do that. But honestly, kind of being on a whole bunch of drugs, like, frankly, helped, because, you know, like, not a lot mattered.
Yeah.
It's not like a life state, like a life solution that I recommend. But when you're in crisis and you have to be on drugs because of pain, like,
there you go.
Sometimes it works out. But yeah, the family dynamic was really interesting. And especially because of my sister's illness too, we would get really sort of bizarre texts from, you know, beloved cousins and things like that of like, geez, like, what kind of family karma are you guys dealing with? You know, oftentimes we would just respond with, you're fucking welcome.
Right.
So like sometimes like family just kind of doesn't get it. But at the same time, I also learned that whatever they were coming at me with was coming from a place of love and concern. And so no matter what came out of their mouth, I had to learn to recognize that what they were actually saying was like, I love you and I'm really worried about you, even though it's coming out as the absolute exact opposite.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really beautiful lesson for me, because that's oftentimes what we're all saying to each other. We just don't know how to actually say it.
Right.
And it's easier to learn with family because you love family, or maybe, you tolerate family, but they're in your life no matter what.
That's right.
And so you learn how to manage like the weird personality tics, right? Because they're in your life. And it's this beautiful kind of lesson of like, okay, well, this person is in my life no matter what. I don't particularly like how they're handling this, but I've got to learn how to make it work for me. And so that was actually one of my big lessons with this whole control freak thing of like, I can't change that person. Literally the only thing that I can change about this is how I'm reacting to this person.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first lessons that I had in that was, oh, okay. I mean, the example with my husband's father was when we got the first the only diagnosis that I had was, if you actually like rearrange the words of the diagnosis, it was a slightly less like dramatic or dangerous or awful, whatever diagnosis. And so he's on speakerphone and both of us are in the hospital room. And he's like, well, are you sure it's not this? Because Google says if it's this, then she has less of a chance of dying. And Michael immediately, takes it off speakerphone. And he's like, no, Dad, that's what it is. Like, buckle up,
right. Right.
Sign on, because this is where we are. And so I sat there and I like sat with it for a bit. I was like, well, I could bitch about my father-in-law for the next 2 hours, which isn't going to help any of us.
Right.
Like, or I could interpret that as, I really don't want Lydia to be sick. And this is my way of figuring out how Lydia doesn't have to be as sick. And, I don't want my child upset that his wife is sick. It's like all of it was coming from a space of love. He was just trying to control something that he had no control over.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, illness is, for lack of a better way of describing, it's fascinating and triggering.
Yeah.
And, how, I don't know about you, but my mother used to say to me, don't judge a couple because you never know what goes on behind closed doors.
Totally.
In a way, you never know what telling someone about your critical diagnosis, and I don't care if it's cancer or diabetes or anything, that people respond in ways that are almost always about their own fears, their own experiences, their own narratives, mythologies, etc.
Yeah.
Cancer has a special dramatic tone to it, man. I
feel like it's getting better. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I've just been living with it for so long. But
or cancer has become so chronic,
right.
and so when you look at the statistics and know that 1 in 3, 1 in 4 persons has a type of cancer,
right,
it does become normalized. But certainly, again, as a young person, it has its own subtle or not so subtle implications.
Yeah.
So I wanna switch a little bit. I want to talk about the body. So you wrote, letting my body do what it wanted to do was remarkably freeing. You also wrote, our bodies don't lie, only our minds lie. Further, you said, the body has wisdom too, and the wisdom of the body is always honest. I loved this.
Oh, thank you.
As a person, as a physician who takes care of the body, but I also like to listen and attend to the minds of the women I see. I've never thought about the body's not lying. They tell the truth. Can you unpack it a little bit or talk about it from whether it's your own experience or even what's going on now in your life, like how the body informs you? Because boy, does it.
Yeah. Oof. It's so funny. Like the only thing I can think of right now, just like the immediate thought that popped into my head is I was driving here and I got a call from my vet, my cat's vet. And I'd sent him this video of my cat doing something weird this morning. And I was like, oh my God, is he dying? And the vet was like, no, he's just coughing. I was like, that's what it looks like when a cat coughs. It's like, I've had this guy for like 14 years. I'm like, what is this? He's coughing. And he was like, yes, he's coughing. He's fine. He was like, if he keeps doing it, let me know. But like, he's just probably trying to clear something out of his throat. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, thank you so much for paying attention to the needs of an overbearing cat parent. And like when you were asking me that question, suddenly I was like, oh my God, I was acting like my brain in that moment. And Jake, the cat, was just being the body, coughing, apparently. And it is really interesting, and this is sort of part of my like growing up narrative, is that, if you get sick, you still go to work. If you get sick, you still go to school. It started with me with sports. I was actually a pretty like physically weak kid. And I started doing sports in order to work myself out of some of that. And it worked really well. It almost worked a little too well because like suddenly I was playing on a sprained ankle. I was playing on a sprained knee. I broke my ankle at one point and I was pissed about it. I was like, God damn it. Like now and it's like, I literally just broke my ankle. Like maybe I don't yell at my body about that. And, in college when I was a rower, like I pulled a bunch of ribs out, and instead of sort of being like, oh, maybe, I should do some weightlifting or like strengthening of my core, I was like, I can't believe, my stupid ribs. And it's like, oh my God. So in some respects, this like trying to separate the brain from the body conversation was part of my effort to like, okay, how do I manage this body that got cancer at age 33? And does my brain have any responsibility with that? And I think my brain does and did. That does not mean that I think anybody is responsible for their own cancer diagnosis. But I do think that when we sit around and we ignore the symptoms that our body is showing us, whether it's, in my case, I couldn't breathe. In some cases, it's stomach pain. In some cases, it's whatever. It's a bent elbow, like whatever it is. It usually manifests as a form of pain or like flutteriness or anxiety or like a weird sort of whatever it is. You're the doctor. You've heard all of them. If we ignore it, then we're literally ignoring a body's flare. Like the body is sending up a flare. Bodies shouldn't hurt. They shouldn't hurt. And so if we're living through hurt and we're living through sort of abnormal symptoms and just writing them off, then we're ignoring one of our main partners in life. And, we only have one body, despite what, I don't know, Elon Musk might be working on. Like, like we've only got one, right? And we got to learn how to work with it. And we've got to,
and it's limited time.
Yeah. Yep. And like, and the faster you learn how to work with it, maybe the better the life will then be. And that's a lesson that honestly, I'm still learning. I am now 46. I fully went through menopause as a result of the treatment that I had when I was 40. I've been on hormones now for 2 or 3 years because they finally updated that study. And so I'm allowed to go. But, I lived with hot flashes for 8 years. I lived with my body being like, I'm not okay. Like as a result of this treatment that you put me through, which I needed to do in order to save my body, I'm still not okay. And so then I had to figure out how to get my body healed from the treatment that I gave it to heal it. It's like the whole thing was super meta. And so now at the age of 46, I am 20 pounds heavier than I ever thought I would be. And 8 months ago, I suddenly realized I didn't care, which man, oh man, that was a moment where suddenly like my brain was just like, you know what? I give up. Like you have beat me into submission on this one, and I am now just going to give up. Obviously, there was a lot of therapy that went along with that. But like, that was a moment. And I realized that I'd spent 45 years of my life, well, I don't know, probably 40,
right,
worrying about a number on a scale. And like, good Lord, my body doesn't give a shit what that number says, but my brain did. My body cares about what it feels like. My body cares about whether or not it's, capable of walking up and down a hill. My body cares about whether or not it can stand up and sit down and like do all the things that it needs to do, pump my blood and, feel happiness and joy and sadness and all the things, right? My body doesn't care what a scale says.
Yeah.
And society cares what that scale says. And I don't know if this is a byproduct of therapy or just being 46 and not giving a shit anymore, but like, thumbs up all around on that one.
That's right.
But it's like that has been like this whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what you're speaking to is, I think, if I may.
Go right ahead.
So illness, menopause, these are events in our lives that provoke a lot of feelings, a lot of thinking, a lot of again, interaction with our world around us and how they respond. And one of the things I'm doing now as a clinician, I'm working a lot with women around menopause, is I'm really trying to help them move through or shift, transform the way they're seeing this time in their lives.
Yep.
They see it as nothing but grief, a loss of femininity, vitality, sexual prowess, and it's only negative from here on in. And that's challenging because, one, I want to remind everyone listening, first of all, Lydia, yes, has a lot of life in front of her because she went through early menopause. But even if you go through the normal 51 and a half years of age time frame, hopefully you got a lot of decades in front of you. Mm-hmm. So if you are going to live with anger and grief and resentment of the body around that, I think Lydia and I would agree it's only going to set you up for more illness and more challenge. Yeah. Because part of what Lydia's book also talks about is the discovery, if you will, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lydia, but kind of the discovery of faith, grace, spirit, mm-hmm. that all the other ways in which the mind can move. Mm-hmm. So I remember someone describing fear as just another form of imagination.
What a great way to describe it.
Yeah. And that's the way I think about anger and, a lot of emotions that we experience. And it's just mm-hmm. the brain's capacity to go in a lot of different directions in this totally imaginative sort of way. Yeah. Real, unreal, I don't care. Who's to say whether my anger is valid, invalid, whatever. So as we move towards the end here, I just want to make sure, I have so many things I could talk to you about, but I want to make sure that we remind folks about the whole experience of being a whole human being, and that it isn't easy. Listen, again, being in the world of medicine today, where it's really hard to incorporate and strategize the emotional and psychological plane of someone's experience, combined with their physical symptoms, combined with the limitations of access and racism and misogyny, et cetera, all the boundaries that we face in our daily lives. That one thing I do believe deep on a cellular level mm-hmm. is that the way that we heal, and I say this a lot on GynoCurious, the way we heal is looking at all of these perspectives, and that addressing it sometimes through, you talk about shamanism, mm-hmm. through nutrition, through herbal medicine, through surgery, through, that there are a lot of ways of looking at healing, mm-hmm. and that it's really important that we address kind of the whole person, mm-hmm. as challenging as it can be.
Yeah. One of the things that I've actually found incredibly helpful with this transition through menopause and all the rest of it, I had a very long journey with it because it started in 2012 and didn't end until, really 2023 in some mm-hmm. respects. But, the old stories of maiden, mother, crone.
Yep.
Women do go through very distinct life cycles. Mm-hmm. And because of the way our culture functions, we want all women to stay in the maiden stage of life. And that is not only stupid, but it's impossible.
It just is.
Right. Unless we want all women to die by the time they're, 18, they got to go through mother stage and they've got to go through crone stage. And even if they don't have a child, I spent a great deal of my 30s in mother stage. And as I've been moving into crone, frankly, the sort of feeling around that word that it's acquired, I think it's an awesome word, but a lot of people hear it and go, crone. But elder, grandmother, abuela, we are one of two species where the female of the species survives past fertility. And there's a reason for that. Older women are vitally important to the functioning of a healthy community. And whether it's because they're acting as second parents, whether it's because they are acting as wisdom keepers, whether it's because they're just acting as the water that helps cool the fire, this is a role that we all not only should play, but we must play for a healthy society. And the fact that so many women are trapped in this, if I don't stay a maiden, my life is over stage of life, is doing them damage, and it's doing society damage. And I don't think we have really actually reckoned with how much damage that has actually caused.
Yeah.
And it's not going to solve issues around the patriarchy until women kind of figure this out. And, you know, like I was joking, like there's aspects of my life that I just don't care anymore. But there's this real freedom that comes with like not caring about some of these things and instead choosing to care about other things. And, you know, and I don't know who misses having a period. Like I don't miss having a period.
Some women do. It's remarkable, but no, I agree with you.
Like, all right, like whatever floats your boat. But like, you know, there is sort of this aspect of like, look at this like remarkable world that opens up, like the brain fog lessons, you know, suddenly there's all of this time and like, there's like a calmness that I never felt before when I was younger. And, you know, I don't know if this is age, like, I don't know if men go through their same version of menopause and we just don't sort of really see it in the same way. But like, I don't think they do. Men are sort of steady in the way they go, and women kind of have their ups and downs and ins and outs, and we flow, right? Women flow. And I would be super upset if I didn't have a crone stage of life. Obviously, I'm also like fully aware that I am going to spend more than half of my life, hopefully, in the crone stage of life. And so like I had to get comfortable with it. But, you know, I did. And, you know, even all my friends now, because I'm 46, so most of my friends are in perimenopause if they've even started anything.
Right.
And they're all like, holy fuck, what the hell is happening to me? You know, and I'm like, just ride the wave. Like, just ride the wave, friend, get some hormones. And like, you know, in a few years, you will feel like a whole new person. And you won't even know what hit you.
Right.
And they're like, that can't possibly be true. Like my vagina is dry. Like I have absolutely no desire to have sex. Like my kids are driving me crazy. Like I used to be able to think and now I can't think. Like what the hell's going on? And I'm like, just chillax for like 5 years.
Right.
And like, it'll be fine.
Right.
And, you know, like, but we're not taught to chillax for 5 years and it'll be fine. And I'm not saying that by chillax, like, don't go find, you know, a good healthcare practitioner to help you manage the hormones. Like, you know, take care of yourself in the meantime. Make sure to start lifting weights. I made that mistake. My bone density is bad. So lift weights. But like, we need to figure out a way to like re-dialogue once you're out of this particular like baffling stage, how truly amazing and exciting it can actually be.
Yeah. So what you were describing is what a lot of social scientists call the grandmother hypothesis, this concept of, where people have asked, what possible evolutionary benefit could the menopause be? Why would we live to this point where we can't have sex all the time? Why would we live if we're not
tired?
That's right, exactly. Because we got smarter. And just as you described, what we've observed is that communities with grandmothers, whether it's in our species or others, that we tend to the fire, we tend to the kids, that communities do better, that the health of children is better, that the well-being of the adults, the parents are better, that the whole community benefits from it. And man, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether we just spend way too many years caring that we eventually just don't care, whether it's this beautiful hormonal shift, you know, where we don't have as much estrogen on board and it's the estrogen that makes us worry so much. I don't know. But yeah, it is a really common experience that women will tell me they just don't give a fuck anymore. And it is absolutely liberating. And so, I just want to highlight what you're sharing. It's like, it doesn't mean out there that you ignore how your body's feeling as you go through this transition. Please, there's so many ways in which healthcare providers can help you feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I like to say, you know, I'm kind of like the cobbler whose kids have no shoes.
Right.
I was the gynecologist who went through hot flushes, all the changes. And I just kept saying, oh, it will go away. Oh, I'll take care of it. And I never get to it. I just kept taking care of everybody else and not myself.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. You just do not have to do that.
No.
I just want to share with the audience something else you wrote, and then we're going to say so long. So you wrote According to some theories, cancer is a physical manifestation of our shadow side. If we humans are light and energy and hope and vibrancy, doesn't our shadow side deserve more than simple chemical warfare? What if treatment and recovery require deep emotional and spiritual and mental evaluation, support and healing? What if the process requires us to get truly naked, not just with our cells, that's cells, but with everything that makes us who we are? Bravo. Oh my goodness. Bravo.
Yeah.
So, despite extraordinary changes, that cancer, illness, the loss of someone we love. I mean, there's so many events in our lives that can be so triggering that, extraordinary things happen physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, at times of extreme trauma. And I invited Lydia here today to share with you the transformations that can occur, the movement beyond, the continued learning. I think that we're all continually learning, and I don't know why it's true, but it seems like when one is really ill, one says, "Oh, I'm going to live life for the moment. I'm not going to worry about the future," and it's great. Like, it happens for a while and then we forget about it. Like, I don't know what that's about, why we need to be reminded through illness, but that seems to be, or the loss of someone we love. But I want to remind us all that, there's some real beauty to surrendering, listening to our bodies, having faith, and whatever that means to you, but just looking forward instead of just always looking back at what you've lost and what you think you can't be anymore. The grace to say, I had cancer, and it's like, why not? I had the body parts. I'm not special. And that there's a whole host of emotions, whether they be anger at our father-in-laws or fear, frustration, hope, dreams, all these things. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
Lydia, do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, wow. Not without opening a whole nother set of can of worms.
Ooh, we're going to have another conversation. Because I want to remind people that to go to your website, and it's Lydia Slaby, SLABY.com. And one of the things you have on your website is that you're a witch. And I want to end the conversation with, what does a witch mean to you? I love that you're a witch.
Oh, a witch to me means that I'm capable of changing my own perspective.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a little magic to that.
Totally.
And there's a lot of faith.
There's a lot of faith.
And
there's a lot of openness to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of letting go. Not caring what the actual answer is. Yeah. And there's a lot of childlike wonder at it as well.
Oh, I love that.
If I get rid of this over here, what can I open up over here?
Yeah. Yeah. You wrote that when mind body syncs up, truly magical stuff happens. And I think that's true, that when we are open to listening, when we kind of push the denial proclivities aside, when we truly listen and see ourselves, magic happens. Magic happens. Yeah.
It really does.
So I end the show typically asking my guests what gives them pleasure. And my hope for you is there are many things that give you pleasure. But if you had to describe one thing that's apart from work, your job titles, what gives you pleasure?
Well, it's August, and what gives me a great deal of pleasure at the moment is sitting in a pool reading a book.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Great.
The water brings me a great deal of pleasure.
Great. Great. May you be immersed in it. Many days ahead of us. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you, Amy. This is lovely.
It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah.
And thank you to Jen Hammoud, who's here in the studio with us, and Matt Rosenberg, both producers of Radio Free Rhinecliff, and to David Hoffman, the editor of my show. Until the next episode of GynoCurious, please stay well and listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest, best of teachers, not to be ignored.